My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I parked my old Dodge in the lot outside Harrison Lake Estate. This wasn't my world. Shiny Lincolns and new Teslas gleamed under the spring sun, their owners gliding out in suits that probably cost more than my last car. I sat there for a moment, clutching the envelope in my jacket. $24,000, my whole retirement cushion, folded twice, edges already worn from how often I'd checked it. It pressed against my chest like a brick, but I told myself it was worth it. Jenna's wedding day. My only granddaughter. I'd been waiting for this day. 6 months of extra hours at the lumber yard, skipping lunches, saying no to fishing with the fellas. Also, my little girl could have the day she'd always dreamed of. I tried not to think about how far away she'd grown since college, or how she now seemed most at home with people whose lives were all champagne brunches and weekend trips to the Hamptons. I'd raised her myself after her mother, my daughter, passed away. Now she was marrying into the Brooks family, folks who owned half of Columbus, Ohio. I slid out of the car, pulling my best navy blazer straight, and felt all the old aches in my bones. The air was filled with the scent of cut grass and imported lilies. I tried to picture Jenna at 6, running toward me on stubby legs after kindergarten, but the vision dissolved as I saw her in the distance, tall, elegant, in a white gown, her dark hair coiled like a movie star's. She looked back, saw me, and for a second, her eyes softened. But then she caught herself, turned away, and called, "Grandpa, you actually made it." No hug, no joy, just a cool acknowledgement. She moved on before I could say anything, heading toward her soon-to-be in-laws. "Ken, Carol, come meet my grandfather." Their voices carried over, crisp and practiced. Ken Brooks strode over, silver hair shining, hand outstretched. "Lester, good to meet you. How's retired life out in the country? Must be a change after all those years at the mill." The way he said the mill stung. Not engineering. Not manager, just the mill, like I'd spent my life stacking boxes instead of running teams. Carol's smile was wide but empty. "Oh, Jenna's so lucky to have a granddad like you. The hard-working spirit runs in your family." I nodded, feeling invisible. Jenna's fiancé, Ben, shook my hand quickly before guiding her away. She glowed around the Brookses, smiling at Ken's jokes, hanging on Carol's words. I followed the crowd inside. Chandeliers sparkled above us, and everything from the marble floors to the fresh tulips screamed money. My shoes squeaked, too old for this new world. Someone in a headset, clipboard in hand, steered me toward the bride's family seating, just me, stuck at the end of a long table by the window, the rest reserved for real family. The envelope in my jacket felt heavier by the second. I kept one hand on it as if it might slip away. Jenna drifted over. She was radiant, but the sweetness I remembered was gone, replaced by a polished surface. "Grandpa, the photographer is setting up for family portraits. You can sit here, okay?" she said, voice gentle but firm. "Ben's parents and siblings are all going to do the first round." I swallowed hard. "Sure, honey. I'll just watch from here." I sat down, staring at my wrinkled hands, these same hands that had fixed her bicycles and tied her shoes, paid for her ballet lessons, and sent her to the fancy university that took her far away from home. The pain ran deep, but I kept my head up, watching as the Brooks family gathered around Jenna for pictures, arms around her like she'd always been theirs. My phone buzzed, a text reminder, reception balance due tomorrow, $24,000. I let it sit there, the screen burning a hole in my heart. My gift, my sacrifice. Would it matter at all, now that I was just an afterthought? The day spun on. Laughter filled the ballroom, the photographer called for more smiles, and Jenna shone in every frame, her new family, her new life. I stayed in my seat, a stranger at my own granddaughter's wedding, clutching a torn envelope and memories that felt older by the second. The ballroom at Harrison Lake Estate was alive with celebration. But I felt like a ghost. The chatter around me blurred into a low hum as the Brooks family posed for pictures, their laughter echoing across the marble floors. I kept my eyes on Jenna, my granddaughter, hoping for some sign that the little girl I'd raised was still in there somewhere. When the portraits finished, the Brookses swept her away, and I was left at my table, a single place setting surrounded by empty chairs. I stared at my reflection in the polished silverware and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I had promised myself not to cause a scene, but the rejection burned deep. A young server stopped at my table with a smile, placing a glass of lemonade in front of me. "You doing okay, sir?" she asked quietly. Her kindness nearly undid me. "Yes, just proud is all." My voice cracked, so I coughed to cover it. She nodded, understanding more than she let on, and disappeared into the crowd. The reception rolled on in waves of applause, music, and sparkling wine. Jenna and Ben cut the cake, shared their first dance, and the guests cheered. I watched it all from my corner, a spectator at the event I had sacrificed so much for. Every detail around me seemed to mock my efforts. The forted wedding cake, the violin quartet in the corner, the table arrangements, each one a reminder of the money I'd poured into this day. My pension savings, gone in a blink, and for what? To be excluded, invisible? I found myself drifting back to memories of Jenna as a child, birthday parties at the town park, Christmas mornings with cheap toys but big smiles. She used to sit on my lap and beg for one more story, promise she'd always need her grandpa. I thought those promises would last. Across the room, Ben's father, Ken, stood and tapped his glass for a toast. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's all raise a glass to my son, Ben, and his beautiful bride, Jenna. We are so proud to welcome her into our family." Applause thundered around me. Ken continued, "It's not every day you find someone as special as Jenna. She brings out the best in our boy. Here's to a lifetime of happiness." I forced a smile, raising my glass, but my heart wasn't in it. Carol, Ben's mother, leaned in and kissed Jenna's cheek, whispering something that made her laugh, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. The Brookses were natural at this, effortlessly charming, endlessly confident. I wondered if Jenna had ever felt this loved with me, or if she'd always been searching for something more. As the room buzzed with conversation, I overheard snatches of talk at nearby tables. "Isn't Jenna lucky to have found such a wonderful family? The Brookses spared no expense, you can tell. What a stunning event." I wanted to stand up and shout, it was my money too. I paid for this. But I kept quiet, knowing it would only make things worse. Dinner was served, a parade of dishes I could barely pronounce, let alone afford on my own. Salmon with some kind of fancy sauce, asparagus arranged like artwork, tiny potatoes stacked with precision. I pushed the food around my plate, appetite gone. Jenna eventually made her way to my table. She looked radiant, cheeks flushed with happiness, or maybe the wine. "Grandpa, are you enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice polite but distracted. "I am, sweetheart. I'm happy for you." I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She smiled, a quick, practiced gesture. "That's good. Ben's parents have just been wonderful, haven't they? I feel like I finally belong." Something in my chest cracked. "You'll always belong with me, Jenna," I managed. She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder at Ken and Carol, who were waving her back. "I have to go." "Thank you, Grandpa." She squeezed my hand and hurried away, her dress trailing like a banner behind her. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the imprint of her hand on mine, wondering if I'd ever get to hold it again the way I did when she was a little girl. As the evening wore on, the celebration ramped up, dancing, toasts, laughter. I became more and more invisible, the old man in the corner who didn't know the right stories or the latest jokes, who didn't fit in with this new family. My thoughts drifted to the envelope still tucked in my pocket. $24,000, and for what? To watch someone else claim the title of family? At some point, Ben's brother, Zach, plopped down in the chair next to me. You must be Jenna's granddad. Lester, right? He grinned, a little tipsy. Heck of a wedding, huh? The Brookses don't do anything halfway. I hear you put in a chunk for all this. That's real generous, sir. Respect. He clapped me on the back before stumbling off toward the dance floor. Respect. Was that what I'd bought? The word echoed as I watched Jenna pose for more photos, surrounded by the Brooks family, her new world spinning on without me. I glanced at my watch. Soon, the final bill would come due, and I'd be expected to quietly pay up and fade away. I looked around at the faces laughing, dancing, celebrating, everyone so sure of their place. I realized, maybe for the first time, that my place was somewhere else now. I was still Grandpa, but I was no longer at the center of Jenna's world. Maybe I never had been, not really. The realization hurt, but there was a strange peace in it too, a peace I hadn't known since Jenna's mother died all those years ago. I sat back, closed my eyes, and listened to the music. For the first time that night, I let myself be just a guest at the party, no longer the provider, no longer the hero, just a man saying goodbye to the role he cherished most. The night wore on, and the celebration only grew louder. I'd never seen so much champagne poured in my life, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays that sparkled like the city skyline. The Brookses seemed to know everyone. They slapped backs, shared old stories, and drew Jenna into every photo, every inside joke, until she glowed with their acceptance. From my corner table, I watched it all, every moment feeling like another step further away from the little girl I'd raised in a rented house on Oakwood Lane. I was proud of Jenna, truly, but pride felt like a thin shield against the cold ache spreading in my chest. Somewhere between the third toast and the fourth round of dancing, the event planner, her name was Madison, I think, brought over a leather folder and placed it beside my plate with quiet efficiency. Mr. Evans, when you have a moment, she said, nodding with professional courtesy. Inside the folder was the itemized bill for the reception: catering, flowers, music, photography, decor, each line a reminder of the price tag for love and belonging. My eyes found the bottom line: $24,000. My signature was needed on the last page, along with a check or payment authorization. I glanced at the empty seat across from me, where Jenna's mother should have been. For a moment I saw her there, smiling, reminding me that this was what we'd worked for all those years, to give Jenna a chance at happiness. But was this happiness, really? Or just expensive make-believe? I closed the folder, leaving it untouched for now. Instead, I stood and slipped out the side door for some air, the night breeze carrying the faint scent of lilacs from the garden. I wandered along the gravel path behind Harrison Lake Estate, past trimmed hedges and flickering lanterns. Fireflies danced over the water, and for a moment I let myself breathe, far from the noise and judgment inside. Memories pressed in, the time Jenna scraped her knee falling off her bike, and I carried her home, promising ice cream would fix everything. Or the night before her first high school dance, when I sat on the porch swing hemming her dress because either of us could afford a tailor. Every moment, every sacrifice, all leading here. My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Sam. You hanging in there, Les? Don't let him get to you. Remember, she's your granddaughter. That doesn't change. I smiled, grateful for Sam's bluntness. He'd lost touch with his own kids, scattered across the country chasing careers and dreams. Don't spend your life buying love, he used to warn. Give what you can, but keep a piece for yourself. I lingered by the water, trying to remember the last time Jenna had visited me out in the old farmhouse, maybe Thanksgiving. 2 years ago? After that, invitations got lost, calls grew short, and her world became bigger and shinier, leaving me in the rearview. The band struck up a slow tune inside. Through the windows, I saw Jenna and Ben spinning across the floor, her head thrown back in laughter. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her, and for a moment, my anger softened. Maybe this was what she wanted all along, a life I could never have given her, no matter how hard I tried. But as I turned to head back inside, I heard voices near the garden arch. I recognized Ken Brooks and his wife Carol, their silhouettes outlined by fairy lights. "I told you Jenna's grandfather would pay up," Ken said, his voice low but smug. "Old Les is reliable. People like him always do the right thing, no matter how they're treated. The check will clear by morning, and the rest is just appearances." Carol laughed quietly. "He's easy to overlook. That's the way people like that are, generous to a fault, but never quite belonging." Their words stung more than I expected. Generous to a fault. Never quite belonging. I waited until they moved away before slipping back inside, their laughter trailing behind them like a bad taste. I found my seat and stared at the bill. Generous to a fault, I repeated to myself. Maybe that was true, but tonight, something in me was changing. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I signed the bill, but didn't drop the check inside. Instead, I tucked it back into my jacket, feeling the crisp edge against my chest, my last piece of dignity. As dessert was served, Jenna came over again, cheeks flushed from dancing. "Grandpa, I hope everything's all right. Did the planner bring the bill over? The staff just wants to wrap things up before midnight." I met her eyes, searching for any sign of the child I remembered. "Jenna, are you happy? Is this the life you really wanted?" I asked softly, unable to keep the worry from my voice. She hesitated, then looked away. "It's the life I chose, Grandpa. You've always wanted the best for me. This is what I want." Her voice was firm, but her eyes seemed troubled. She squeezed my hand, just for a moment, before the band called for her and she hurried back to her new family. As the final song played and the night wound down, I sat alone, listening to the laughter and celebration swirling around me. The envelope in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a question I hadn't yet answered. Was it really too late to remind Jenna where she came from? Or was I the one who needed to learn to let go? I stayed long after most of the guests had filtered out, watching the cleanup crews sweep away confetti and box up leftover cake. The lights above the dance floor were dimming, their golden glow now faded and tired. Jenna and Ben left in a vintage convertible, trailing a string of cans, the crowd cheering as they disappeared into the night. I lingered, wishing I could turn the clock back to the days when Jenna needed me, when a scraped knee or a broken toy was the end of the world, and I could fix everything with a hug. Now, she was someone else's family, someone else's pride. I wandered through the now empty ballroom, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets. The envelope with the check still sat there, unopened. Madison, the event planner, found me near the back exit. She was polite but tired, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "Mr. Evans, just wanted to remind you, the venue needs final payment tonight. It's just policy. We can process it at the front desk." I nodded, feeling strangely detached. "Thank you, Madison. I'll be out in a moment." She left, glancing over her shoulder with professional concern. I stood in the quiet, staring at the room where I'd watched my granddaughter become a stranger. That was when I saw Ken Brooks by the bar, talking quietly with Antonio, the estate manager. Their voices were low, but I caught enough. "Not my problem if the payment's delayed," Ken said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Jenna's grandfather always comes through. If he doesn't, well, it's not my family's responsibility, is it?" Antonio shrugged. "The policy's clear. If there's an issue, we go to collections. No exceptions." They both laughed, the sound echoing across the empty space. I clenched my fists in my pockets, fighting the urge to say something. But what was there to say? This was their world now: rules, money, appearances. People like me were just stepping stones, wallets with legs. I walked out onto the terrace, the night air sharp and cold. The estate grounds stretched out before me, manicured lawns glowing silver under the moon. For a long time, I just stood there, letting the silence settle in my bones. Memories washed over me: Jenna's first school play, her college graduation, late-night phone calls when she was homesick and lonely. I'd been her anchor for so long, but now she was sailing into waters where I couldn't follow. Maybe that was how it was supposed to be. Maybe all parents and grandparents ended up watching from the shore as their kids drifted away. But it didn't have to happen like this. Not with bitterness. Not with humiliation. Not with a final act of generosity being treated like a business transaction. Back inside, I walked toward the front desk, the envelope heavy in my hand. Madison looked up expectantly. I set the check on the counter, then paused. Something inside me rebelled, a stubborn old pride that refused to be trampled. "Can you hold this until morning?" I asked quietly. "Just give me a little more time." She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Mr. Evans. I'll lock it in the office safe. We can finalize tomorrow." "Thank you," I said, meeting her eyes. "You've been very kind." She smiled, a little surprised, and tucked the envelope away. As I walked out to the parking lot, I felt lighter, but also a little lost. My Dodge was the last car left in the far corner, old and reliable, just like me. I slid into the driver's seat and sat in the dark, the silence pressing in. I pulled out my wallet and stared at an old photo: Jenna, maybe 10 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, both of us grinning like fools. It felt like a lifetime ago. That night, I drove home on empty highways, passing neighborhoods of darkened houses, each one hiding its own stories of love, disappointment, and letting go. My little house on Willow Street seemed especially quiet when I unlocked the door. The living room was just as I'd left it: faded couch, stacks of old magazines, a few photos of Jenna and her mother on the mantel. I sat in my recliner, the weight of the night pressing down on me. The check was still at the estate, locked away, the payment for a celebration that felt less and less like a gift and more like a surrender. What did I owe Jenna now? What did I owe myself? I poured myself a glass of water, staring at my reflection in the window. I saw a man who had given everything for his family and was being asked, finally, to give himself up too. The thought stung, but it also brought a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I took out a piece of notepaper and started to write, slow, careful, the way my hands remembered from a lifetime of signing paychecks and birthday cards. "Dear Jenna," I wrote, "tonight I watched you walk into a new life. I hope it brings you every happiness. But I also hope, someday, you'll remember where you came from, and who stood behind you, even when you didn't notice. I love you. Grandpa." I folded the note and placed it on my kitchen table, next to my car keys. Tomorrow, I'd return to the estate. Tomorrow, I'd decide what kind of goodbye I wanted to give. For the first time in a long time, I slept deeply, the weight of decision finally lifting. Morning would come soon, with its own demands, but tonight, at least, belonged to me. The morning sun woke me earlier than usual, its pale light streaking across the kitchen floor. I sat at the table, staring at the note I'd written Jenna the night before. My coffee tasted different, less bitter, more grounding. I kept thinking about that envelope locked away at Harrison Lake Estate, about the words I'd heard from Ken Brooks, and about all the little ways I'd let myself become invisible in Jenna's life. A robin sang on the windowsill as I got dressed, put on my cleanest shirt, and slipped the old photo of Jenna into my wallet. I paused in the doorway, looking around at the house one last time: old furniture, faded curtains, 1,000 memories packed into every corner. It struck me that this place, humble as it was, held more real love than any ballroom ever could. The drive back to the estate was slow. I took the long way, winding through town, passing the school where I'd waited for Jenna every afternoon, the ice cream shop where we used to go after her piano recitals, and the park where I'd taught her to ride a bike. Everywhere I looked, I saw echoes of the life we'd shared. Harrison Lake Estate was quiet when I arrived, just a few cars in the staff lot. Madison greeted me at the door, her expression curious but gentle. "Good morning, Mr. Evans. Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," I said, and she smiled, sensing I had more on my mind. She led me to her small office, where the envelope waited, still unopened. "No one's touched it," she said. "Whenever you're ready." I sat down across from her, the check heavy in my hands. "Funny thing about money," I said quietly. "People think it's just numbers, but it's really time, sweat, memories, all piled up and counted out." She nodded. "I see a lot of families, Mr. Evans. Sometimes the money brings them together. Sometimes it tears them apart." I took a deep breath. "Could you do me a favor? If anyone asks, say there was a delay with my payment. I'd like to speak with my granddaughter before this goes through." Madison's eyes were kind. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." I called Jenna. It rang twice before she answered, her voice groggy. "Grandpa? Is everything okay?" "Jenna, honey, can you meet me at the estate? Just for a few minutes. There's something I need to tell you before I finish up here." She hesitated but agreed. "I'll be there in half an hour." While I waited, I wandered the gardens, remembering the night before. All the laughter, the lights, the applause, how quickly it had faded. The world was quiet now, and I felt like the last guest at a party no one else remembered. When Jenna arrived, she looked tired, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She hugged her arms around herself as she walked up. "Is something wrong, Grandpa?" I took a seat on a bench by the lake and gestured for her to sit beside me. "Jenna, do you remember the night your mom passed? How I promised I'd always take care of you?" She nodded, blinking hard. "Of course I do. I haven't forgotten, Grandpa." I smiled, but it was sadder than I meant. "I hope that's true. I watched you last night. You were beautiful. You have a whole new family now, a new life. That's good. But I want to ask you something. Do you really know who you are? Do you remember where you came from, or is all of this just a show for people who will never love you the way I do?" She was quiet for a long time, looking down at her hands. "It's complicated, Grandpa. The Brooks family, they make things easy. They open doors I never thought I'd walk through. But sometimes I feel like I have to keep proving I belong." "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," I said gently. "You belong because you're Jenna. Not because of your dress, or your husband's last name, or the size of the wedding. You belong because you're loved." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry if I made you feel left out," she whispered. "I never meant to." "I know, honey," I said, my voice soft. "But love isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, too. You have to demand respect. Even from the people you love the most." She nodded, wiping her cheek. "I do love you, Grandpa. I didn't know how to fit you into all this. I'm sorry." I squeezed her hand, the way I had when she was little. "Don't ever apologize for growing up. But don't forget who helped you get here. That's all I ask." She hugged me then, tight, fierce, the way she used to as a child. I held her close, wishing I could freeze the moment forever. When we pulled apart, I handed her the note I'd written. "Read this when you're alone. It's just a reminder." She nodded, tucking it into her purse. "Will you be at the brunch later?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But first, I have something to take care of." As she walked back toward her car, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in days. Whatever happened next, Jenna knew she was loved, and she knew who had always been in her corner. I headed back inside, envelope in hand, ready to finish what I'd started. But this time, I was doing it on my terms. I walked back into Madison's office, the envelope feeling oddly light in my hand. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust motes drifting lazily in the quiet. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at the check. 6 months of overtime, years of careful saving, all my hopes for Jenna's future pressed between two pieces of paper. Madison looked up from her desk. "Did you get the chance you needed, Mr. Evans?" "I did," I replied. My voice was steadier now, my decision made. "Thank you for waiting." She smiled. "No problem at all. If you're ready, I can process the payment now." I paused, taking a deep breath. "You know, Madison, last night I sat here thinking money was the only thing I had left to give. But that's not true. There's memories, lessons, love. All things you can't buy, not with all the checks in the world." She nodded, her expression softening. "That's true, sir. Some things are priceless." I slid the envelope toward her but placed my hand gently on top, stopping her. "But before you do anything, could you tell me exactly what happens if I don't pay? Who gets in trouble?" She hesitated, surprised by the question. "Well, technically the contract is in your name, Mr. Evans. But it was arranged on behalf of the bride's family. If the bill isn't settled today, the estate has policies. We send a formal notice, then turn it over to collections after a week. There's usually still time for someone to step in." I nodded slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "Thank you, Madison. One more thing. I'd like to speak to Mr. Brooks." "Ken Brooks. Is he still on the property?" She checked a clipboard. "Yes, he's meeting with the florist in the north garden. Should I let him know you'd like a word?" "Please." A few minutes later, Ken Brooks strolled into the office, cool and confident as ever. He smiled like nothing in the world could surprise him. "Lester! Good to see you up and about after last night's festivities. Is everything squared away?" I stood up, facing him across Madison's desk. "I wanted to talk before I finished the payment, Ken. You see, last night I overheard you say something about how folks like me always do the right thing, no matter how we're treated." His smile faded a little. "I'm not sure I recall." I held up a hand. "Let me finish. You're right about one thing, Ken. I was raised to do the right thing. I was also raised to believe that family means respect, not just money. Last night, I watched my granddaughter become a Brooks. I watched her become part of your family. But I also watched you and yours treat me like a footnote. Like a bank account on legs." Ken's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Madison listened quietly, her hands folded. "I spent years making sure Jenna had every opportunity. I gave until it hurt, and then I gave some more. But there comes a point when a man has to remember his own worth. So, here's what's going to happen. The bill's not being paid today. If the Brooks family values Jenna as much as they say, then you can step up and cover the rest. Or you can work out a plan, just like anyone else. But my part in this, my giving without gratitude, it ends now." Ken looked genuinely stunned for a moment, then recovered his smooth demeanor. "You understand, Lester, this could create an embarrassment for Jenna. For the family. Is that what you want?" "No," I replied. "What I want is for her to be respected. For her new family to show that respect with more than empty words and fancy parties. I'm done being invisible. If that's embarrassing, then so be it." He pressed his lips together, clearly annoyed. "We'll handle it," he said curtly, turning on his heel. As he left, Madison gave me a look of quiet admiration. "Not many people stand up to the Brookses, Mr. Evans. Especially not in their own world." I felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes you have to, or you'll never get seen at all. I walked out of the office, feeling a sense of relief settle in my bones. The estate was peaceful in the daylight, the artificial glamour of the previous night washed away. I took one last stroll around the gardens, breathing in the smell of cut grass and damp earth. I realized I didn't regret my decision, not one bit. Back in the parking lot, I saw Jenna waiting by her car. She must have seen Ken storm out. She hurried over, worry written all over her face. "Grandpa, what happened? Is everything all right?" I smiled and squeezed her hand. "Everything's fine, Jenna. I just needed to make sure that the people who call you family are willing to stand by you for real, not just when the music's playing and the lights are on." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time there was pride in them. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything. Even the hard lessons." We hugged for a long time, neither of us needing to say anything more. The sun shone brighter, the air felt warmer, and for the first time since the wedding began, I felt like I truly belonged to myself and to the granddaughter who finally understood what love was worth. Driving away from Harrison Lake Estate, I rolled down the window and let the spring wind wash over my face. The morning was bright, the world fresh, and for the first time in years, I felt unburdened. My hands didn't shake anymore. The tension in my chest, that old ache of being unwanted, was gone. All that was left was a calm, stubborn pride. I took the long road home, passing through the neighborhoods where Jenna had grown up, past the park where she learned to swing, the library where we'd spent rainy afternoons, and the bakery that still made her favorite cinnamon rolls. Each place was a reminder of love that was real, small, and enduring. By the time I reached Willow Street, my heart had settled. I put the kettle on and sat by the window, looking at the wildflowers Jenna's mother planted decades ago. The house was quiet, but not empty. Every room, every photo, every scuffed floorboard hummed with memories. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the exclusion, the coldness from Jenna's new family. But I also thought about the hug in the garden, the tears in Jenna's eyes when she realized what she'd lost and what she still had. That, more than any check or party, was my real inheritance to her. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It was Jenna, standing on the porch in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, hair windblown. She was alone. "Grandpa," she said softly, "can I come in?" "Always," I replied, stepping aside. She wandered into the living room, picking up a photo of her as a child. For a while, she said nothing. The silence was easy, like it used to be. "I read your letter," she finally said, her voice trembling. "And I talked to Ben. I told him that no matter how far I go, this will always be home. You'll always be my family." I nodded, feeling a sting in my eyes. "That's all I ever wanted, honey. Not for you to stay, but for you to remember." She hugged me then, the way she did when she was a little girl, tight, fierce, honest. "Thank you for teaching me what matters. I think I lost myself for a while. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to see it." "It's all right," I said, smoothing her hair. "Growing up is just another way of saying goodbye to who we were. But you can always find your way back. That's what family is for." We sat and talked for hours, not about money or parties, but about life. About her mother. About the small things we missed. Jenna laughed through her tears, promising to visit more often, to bring Ben around, to never let anyone tell her again who she was supposed to be. Before she left, she placed a small envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled, a little sheepishly. "A refund, Grandpa. Or at least a start. I talked to the Brooks family. They agreed to split the bill. Ben and I will handle our share. You don't have to pay for my choices anymore." I shook my head, pride and amusement mingling in my chest. "Honey, it was never about the money. It was about making sure you knew what you were worth." She wiped her eyes. "I know that now." When she left, the house felt brighter. I sat in my chair, looking at the envelope she'd given back, and laughed, a deep, relieved sound I hadn't made in years. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and watched the sun set over the back fence. I thought about how love sometimes hurts, how giving can feel thankless, and how respect has to be earned, even from those we love most. But I also thought about how sometimes the best way to teach is to let go. Sometimes you have to stop giving to be seen for who you are, not what you provide. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the people you love most will find their way back, not because you paid their way, but because you showed them the path. Jenna did. And as I drifted to sleep, the house quiet around me, I knew that was enough. I hadn't lost a granddaughter. I'd found her again, grown, wiser, and more grateful than ever. The world outside kept spinning. But here, in this little house, family was something real. Something earned. And something that would last, long after the party was over.